Hey everyone, I just wanted to give a brief update on the Terraforming Mars data collection project we have going on over on Board Game Arena. And afterwards I'll be analyzing some data we've collected on Preludes and city locations. Now, if you've seen my previous video, I mentioned that I had collected about 2,000 game logs from BGA, and these were two-player base plus Prelude games from the Arena season with the Tharsis map. Our current status is that we now have over 3,000 games, and these actually include all the game modes on BGA as well as all of the maps. Now, this dataset was started from scratch this week, and the reason I've been able to collect that many games this quickly is because now there are more people than just me contributing. So these are the top contributors right now. We have a collaborative tool where people can scrape games and submit them to a central archive. The tool we're using to do this is a simple desktop application that I made. It's very simple. You just enter your BGA credentials here, and these are just stored locally on your machine. And you enter an API key that you get from me, and then you can go to scraping, get a scraping assignment, and just click start scraping. And the game logs, this application will log into BGA, collect game logs, parse them, and upload them to an API that will store them to a central cloud archive. You can then also download all the games scraped by everyone with just one click. You can look at some statistics here for your contributions and whatnot. And we have some cool analysis features that we're building out. With this dataset, we can start to look at some basic statistics like what is the most popular map, and Tharsis reigns supreme by a huge margin. And this is probably because the last two Arena seasons have used Tharsis exclusively as the map. Amazonas Planitia in second place with 293 games. I should mention that this is because there's one player who has played 289 games on that map, so that's why. Other maps not as popular yet. Now you may notice that the number of games here is quite a bit higher than I mentioned before. And this is because before scraping the entire game logs, we can index the games with just like basic table configuration and metadata. And the page we're using to do that is not affected by the daily replay limit. So that's why we have more indexed games than scraped games. Okay, so let's dive into some more in-depth statistics. Last time we looked at corporation win rates, and this time I'll be looking at Prelude win rates. I'll be using the same KPIs as last time, so win rate, average ELO gain, and average ELO of the players that played it. Experimental Forest on top, along with Business Empire. No real surprise there. These are regarded as very strong preludes. Perhaps Experimental Forest regarded as the best prelude. But there's a bit of a difference. So Business Empire has the highest average ELO gain in this dataset, whereas Experimental Forest only has a neutral ELO gain. Now, the reason Experimental Forest has such a high win rate is probably because it's played by very strong players, almost 600 on average, whereas it doesn't perform that well ELO-wise. So maybe one that is a little bit overrated by the strongest players, whereas Business Empire just performs very well in general. Perhaps a bit more surprising is that we have Polar Industries in third place here, with a very good win rate. Now, again, I should emphasize that this has a high average ELO, so this is played very often by strong players. I think probably because the weaker players tend to underestimate the strength of the heat prod, whereas the ELO gain here is not that great. So maybe a little bit surprising to see both that one and Aquifer Turbines above Great Aquifer in terms of win rate, but you may notice that Great Aquifer has a higher average ELO gain, and I think this is a prelude that weaker players will more easily recognize as strong, so they play it more often. But this has fairly similar numbers to Aquifer Turbines actually, which just goes to show that these one ocean preludes are probably underrated by most players. An interesting one is Supply Drop. Generally regarded as one of the stronger preludes, it does have a good win rate, but it actually loses elo on average. And if you remember from last video when we looked at histograms of elo gains, I made similar histograms for the preludes. And what can we tell from this? Well, strong players win very often with this prelude against much weaker players, which are the high green bars. But if we look right around +10 and -10 elo change, which are equally matched games, it actually scores below average. So when strong players play against each other, this is a mediocre prelude. That's very interesting. If we move down towards the middle of the win rate table, we find some preludes that are often regarded as very strong. So Huge Asteroid, Unimi Contractor, and to some extent Metals Company, really popular preludes. I actually played in a home game where Huge Asteroid was banned because it was thought of as too strong. Not what we're seeing here. So maybe a bit surprising that these are like right around the middle of the pack. Ecology Experts is a prelude that in my mind should have a pretty good win rate. It's not played very often because it needs specific cards to be any good, but like when you have kelp farming or trees or farming, it can be really good. But the 49% win rate here probably means that weaker players tend to overplay it a little bit. In my last video, I nominated Helion as the most overrated corporation by stronger players, and my nomination for the most overrated prelude by strong players specifically goes to Mohole. And again, we see the pattern of stronger players maybe overrating heat prod a little bit because they know heat prod is important for game control, whereas weaker players usually underrate heat production. But this prelude has the worst average elo gain in this dataset, even worse than Society Support, while it does have a pretty high average elo. Moving into the weaker preludes here, we have Donation. I've heard of this as like an average prelude because it has 21 MC, which is supposedly like the value you should get from a prelude, but this performs pretty poorly. It's not picked very often, and when it's picked, it loses most games, or like 60% of the games, and it loses elo on average. So pretty mediocre prelude. And towards the bottom here, we also find some of our classic noob traps. I researched Outpost and Galilean Mining, and no surprise there. You know, weak players, when they see Jovian tags and titanium production, they just can't resist most of the time. Also, the city preludes, very weak. But again, weak players, they love their cities. Maybe the only surprising thing about this to me is that Self-Sufficient Settlement has the same win rate basically as Early Settlement and an even worse average elo gain. So I always thought of that one as a little bit stronger, but maybe not. And at the bottom of the pack, we find poor old Society Supports. 22% win rate is so bad. Compare that to Phobolog, which was the worst performing corporation with a 31% win rate. So Society Support is just really, really bad. Shout out to Biosphere Support, which is almost as bad in terms of win rate, but actually has a lower average elo gain, so even worse. Yeah, these are pretty bad. As was the case with the corporation statistics, we should keep in mind that the dataset is still relatively small, and these numbers could change as the dataset grows, and we intend to collect a lot more games going forward. But having analyzed this data, I can say that there are some statistics that do tend to stabilize with a smaller number of games, and one of those that I've looked at is trying to analyze the best city locations on the map. Here we have the Farsis map, and as you may remember, most of the games in the dataset were played on this map. I've indicated the coordinates for each tile. I'm not sure if these are official ones, but at least these are the ones that are used on BGA. Some of them have names. most you'll probably know that like 8-4 here and 5-7, 2-5, these are like very popular city locations, but I wanted to analyze that and see if the data actually supported those popular notions. So here we have the output of my analysis. It's a big table of numbers containing all the tiles on Tharsis, and we have a bunch of different stats we can look at. The first one I looked at was average VP, and this is just a number of victory points scored at the end of the game for that city on average. And we can see that the number one city location is not 8-4, but it's this one, 5-7. So this, of course, is another popular one. Whereas 8-4 is all the way down in 6th place with 3.38. But the first thing you'll probably say is that a city location is about more than just the VP scored. And so what I've done is I've calculated the placement bonuses from the city, as well as subsequent placement bonuses the player gets by placing tiles adjacent to the city, so typically converting greeneries next to the city. And I have these here and these different columns. And what I've also done is calculate the total value, the total economic value of the city after counting all the resources collected from the city itself, but also from adjacent tiles. And I've calculated this by assigning values such as steel is worth 2MC, titanium 3MC, plant 2MC, card 3MC, and MC of course is 1MC. Some of those numbers may be debatable, but that's what I've used. If we sort by this column of economic value, we see now indeed it is 8.4 on top. With a massive 18 MC value scored on average or collected on average. And this is a pretty fertile area on the map. We have lots of plants and lots of ocean surrounding this location where you can collect ocean adjacencies. And I think like the maximum value you can actually get from this city is 34 MC. So players are utilizing this one quite efficiently. Another factor to consider is when the city was placed, and we see that 8-4 has an average generation of 4.3, so it's placed very early in the game compared to some other city locations. That also means it has more time to collect resources, so we need to keep that in mind. And we also see that this is by far the most utilized city location with a frequency of 62%. So in more than half of every game, a city is placed here. The second most popular is Noctis City, which of course is a special tile. Noctis, I would say, only scores 3 VP on average. Of course, the main benefit of Noctis is that you can place it whenever you want, so you can just wait and play it with perfect information and surprise your opponent. It also gets quite a bit of economic value, mostly from plants. So what are some popular city locations that aren't that good? Here I've sorted by the number of times played. One thing I noticed was that we have these volcanic areas like Pharsis, Tholus, Pavanus Mons, Escreus Mons, and even Arcia Mons relatively high up on the list. That's probably because of the card lava tube settlement. These all don't score that many points, like less than 2 VP on average. And with the exception of, Pavanus Mons, most of them don't have like a very high economic value either, actually pretty low. So, it just shows why Lava Tube Settlement is not a great card. If we sort by the average number of cards picked up, we'll find this area here down south where there are 2 cards. Of course, 5-8 and 6-8 collect the most number of cards on average because they are on a card themselves. But also 5-7, only 0.3 fewer cards. Whereas these two locations, yeah, you get more cards, but look at the average VP, lower, and also like the MC value much lower than on 5-7. So that's why it's, you often see beginners placing cities here, but it's usually much better to go here, and you'll get all of these juicy ocean adjacencies and plants, and you can still pick up a card or two most of the time. And by the way, it's pretty funny that this 5-8 location collects 0.03 MC on average. That's because of artificial lake. But I would say that most of this analysis, just confirms what probably most strong players already knew. I guess if we sort by average VP again, we can see that the second highest scoring location is 6-3, maybe a little bit surprising, but I guess this is a location where people just place a city after it already has a couple of adjacent greeneries, and we can see that the economic value is pretty low. So while it scores well, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a great play. Looking at economic value again, this 7-4 elbow location is in second place, and it also scores pretty well in terms of points. So maybe one that is slept on a little bit, but I guess it's just a little bit weaker than its adjacent brother here. So overall, the results do confirm like the know-how in the community. That's what I have for today. I just wanted to end on a final call to action. If you want to participate in the data collection, you can download the scraping tool. I put a link in the description. Every contribution helps a lot. You need to use an API key for that, but you can get that from me, or even better, you can join the Hodgepodge Discord where we discuss everything about Terraforming Mars. And with that, hope you're having a great day and see you around.